Hello and welcome. Aquarister here, coming to you with another video, and today we are going to be looking at a healer build, and more specifically, my PvP healer build with Lifestaff Void Gauntlet. Now, with Season 1, there have been some changes, obviously, that a lot of us are trying to adjust to, and part of that for me was I used to run a lot of Shirking Fort in the past, and now I have changed it up, so we had to kind of redo our whole healer fit outside of maybe just my hat. Today we're going to be looking at that build and kind of get a good look into what I've been enjoying as a healer for Season 1 so far. So let's take a look at the gear to get us started. Alright, so as I said, we had to kind of re-look at our armor and our build itself with the introduction of Season 1. Now, with Season 1, we obviously saw the changes of Shrinking Fort and Fortify in general. And so Shrinking Fort used to be a big part of my build, and so since that was a big part of my build for my healer build, I had to kind of change it all up because light armor, Shrinking Fort, they don't really blend as good together anymore. So what I ended up going with is a heavy refreshing evasion build, as well as some vigor and vigor to try to remove some of those debuffs that we get. So taking a look first at my hat, this is actually the hat that I used to wear all the time as well. Freedom, Resilient, Fortifying Sacred Ground, still rocking Fortifying Sacred Ground. Even though Fortify did get a decrease, a lot of times in like OPRs, I'm healing a tank or something, and that extra Fortify, that extra armor increase does help them out quite a bit. For my chest piece, this was actually a free chest piece I got from OPR, and rocking Vigor, Refreshing Resilient. Again, I am trying to go more towards the Refreshing Evasion side, but this chest piece was just so good and it was free that we just stuck with it. My gloves and my pants are actually the exact same perks. We're running Refreshing Evasion, Resilient, Invigorated. Invigorated is one that I didn't used to really worry about running too much, but now I do like to run at least one stack of it because I get the 10% reduction of the disease, exhaust, rend. Weaken doesn't really apply to my healer build, but the disease, exhaust, and rend, getting that stuff taken off a little bit quicker does help. So like I said, pants, gloves are the same. For my boots, we do have Vigor, Refreshing Evasion, and Resilient. Vigor is really, really strong right now because of the fact that there's so many fire staffs. Plus you have the bleed and poison duration reduced, so bows that have keenly jagged, shooting poison shots, anything like that, any of that, you know, dot damage, you're gonna have it reduced. So it does help, and then you mix that with like a Desert Sunrise, and now you're up to like almost 30% reduction in that. So that's what we're running for armor. I am running full Rune Glass, so we are running Arboreal Rune Glass, so we get the 2% extra damage per piece, so that equals a 10% damage buff to our nature damage from just our Rune Glass. So that's for gear. Next, we'll look at our jewelry here. So I am running a Divine, Refreshing Evasion, and Health Amulet. Ring, we're going with Hardy, Sacred Nature damage, so you stack that extra 5% of nature damage on top of the 10% we're getting from the Rune Glass, and now we're doing 15% more damage with any of our nature. That does help a lot. And then for our earring, we have another stack of Refreshing Evasion, Refreshing Toast, and Purifying Toast. Refreshing Toast I do highly recommend. It does cut down your cooldown on your potion timer, which does help a lot. Purifying Toast, totally up to you if you want to run that or not. I like it because it does allow me to remove one debuff without having to use an ability or anything like that. So I do tend to use Purifying Toast in certain situations. Next, we'll look at our weapons. For the Lifestaff, I am still running the Glowing Life Crystal Staff. We'll go over the build next, but I am still running Divine Embrace, so therefore I am running the Glowing Life Crystal Staff because it does allow me to get some really quick heals off if need be. Plus the Refreshing Move, Blessed, all that. So really, really good Lifestaff. Still recommend it, even for Season 1. For my Void Gauntlet, I'm running a Blessed, Putrefying Scream, Keenly Empowered Void Gauntlet. If you can get a Blessed, Putrefying Scream Void Gauntlet as a PvP healer, you are good. I wouldn't worry about the third perk as much. If you can get like a Refreshing Move, great. If not, don't worry about it. Just get those two perks at least, and you should be good to go, because Putrefying Scream is a 40% reduction in target's healing. That's huge. That's a really, really big disease that you can apply to someone. So do highly recommend that. For your heart rune, I am currently running Bio Bomb because that is a 30% disease that you can apply. But it just depends on your play style. I know some healers like to run Stone Form so they can increase their survivability. I go for the Bio Bomb so I can help with some of those pushes. It just kind of depends, but either way, as a healer, you are going to get your heart rune back pretty quickly, so do keep that in mind. I feel like with Stone Form, I don't use it as much as I maybe should be, whereas in with like Bio Bomb or Cannon Blast, anything like that where I'm like shooting from range, I find that I use it much more often, and as a healer, we are getting those back quite quickly. So this is what I'm running for armor and for my weapons and jewelry. The only thing that I'm going to recommend to you for this particular build is if you're running the Void Gauntlet, obviously Putrefying Scream should be on your gauntlet, but if you can fit a Nullifying Oblivion perk on your armor somewhere, I would highly recommend it. I have yet to get like the perfect piece for it because I have to give up some of my other perks. Would it be beneficial? Probably, but until I can either find one to buy or craft one myself, I just don't run it. But I do highly recommend it. If you're running this build, I do recommend the Nullifying Oblivion if you can fit it into the build. If not, don't worry about it. Make sure you have your Putrefying Scream. But if you can get it, definitely I do recommend. So that is what we got for our gear, weapons, jewelry, all of that. So next, let's take a look at the attributes and the mastery to see kind of what I'm running. Okay, attributes are pretty straightforward for this build. I run 150 con, the rest goes into focus. I do run a 40 con food in order to get the attribute up there. But yeah, 150 con. I sometimes will run 200 con depending on how I'm playing or what kind of team we have, but usually 150 is my go-to. But don't be afraid to bump up to 200. Below 150, totally up to you. If you feel like you have the survivability, definitely go for it. But like I said, 150, that's what I go with. Everything else in the focus. Alright, next we will look at the Void Gauntlet build. Before the Void Gauntlet build, this is the build that I've really been enjoying lately. I've been running this quite often as a healer, and even I've done a little bit of tanking actually with Void Gauntlet and used a fairly similar build. But for this build, we're going heavy into the decay side because I like to run Glimpse of the Void. Glimpse of the Void does allow us to get cooldowns back instantly as long as we have 4 of the stacks going. So we can get 4 of those Disintegrate stacks. Then once we land a heavy, then it will reset all of our Void Gauntlet abilities. So we go with Forsaken Pact just because we need to get the top perk going. So plus 10% below 50%. We do go with Oblivion all the way down. I know that they changed Invigorating Oblivion a bit, but I do think it's still worth running it. It's not like a really major perk, but I do still run it personally and notice that there is a bit of a difference. Refreshing Precision, so plus 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities on critical hit. So the reason why I do that is because we do land crits with the Void Gauntlet. And you can crit, I believe you can crit with the Orb of Decay as well. So when you shoot that, for every person that you're critting with it, you get a 5% cooldown on all abilities. So you can actually get quite the cooldown reduction. And even if your orb isn't getting the crits, if you land a few heavies or a few lights and get some critical hits, it's just extra cooldown reduction. It does not hurt. Then, of course, we're running Putrefying Scream, which I do run all the way down to Fortifying Echoes. Again, Fortify isn't as strong as it used to be, but it does still help. That 30% extra armor increase is definitely not going to hurt you. So that is the route I go for that. And then on the decay side, we go with Orb of Decay all the way down, so then we get that explosion as well at the end, because that can either heal quite a bit or it can do a decent amount of damage in kind of a splash type of a deal. So you get a little bit of an AoE damage in that way. And then for passives, pretty much you're going to do all the passives on this side other than Fervent Thirst. I don't really care too much about the plus 5% mana. I would rather get the plus 10% damage on successful range attacks against targets with an active debuff. So if you throw an orb and then hit them, that orb will leave a debuff, and then when you hit them, you're doing 10% more with your ranged attacks. So makes sense to do that. And then we have to do all the other perks here in order to get down to Glimpse of the Void, so we can get that potential for the cooldown reduction, or that instant cooldown reduction, which I will kind of show. I've showed in the past, but we'll show again as far as how that works. But yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at for Void Gauntlet. One other change to Void Gauntlet with Season 1 that some people might not have looked too closely at, but you do now have Cleansing Harvest. So they actually changed it. So now Harvest Essence, if you have this particular perk, you will remove 1 debuff. It is a 3-second cooldown, so you can't just sit there removing debuffs over and over. But you can remove 1, move on. So between that and a Purifying Toast, that's 2 debuffs that you can remove just by holding right click and then clicking a button. So not too bad. All right, next, let's take a look at the Lifestaff. So the Lifestaff, I have changed up the build slightly. We used to run Orb of Protection all the time, but again, Fortify changed. I don't think it's quite as strong. I do think Orb of Protection, it still has its use. I still think it is a good ability. For this particular season / patch, I just changed it up to run Beacon again. So a lot of this is going to look very similar to my previous healing builds, but with only a couple minor changes. So looking at the healing side, we have Divine Embrace. We do only go down to that 2nd perk. As always, we pretty much never go down to the 3rd perk. It just kind of bounces another heal, which may happen, may not happen. It's hard to say with OPR. You just never know. We are running Sacred Ground all the way down. And then for our passive perks, we're doing everything except for Mending Touch and Enchanted Justice. I don't really care about the aura going around us. They're removing debuffs. It is a good perk to have, but I think there are others that are more useful. And then what we're doing is we are running the Sacred Protection, which in the past I haven't always ran that, but I have been running it more recently for anyone that's in my group. If you don't want to run that, you could definitely take that off and run either Speed of Light, or you could go with Mending Touch if you don't find that the Sacred Protection is helping you. So you do have some options to change it up if need be. So that's what we're looking at for healing side. You do want to make sure you get Divine Blessing, because when you heal an ally below 50% health, they're healed for 30% more. So that is a huge buff to your healing, especially when you pair it with the Divine Embrace. So definitely recommend that. On the Protector side, we're running Beacon, and I don't run Beacon all the way down to get the haste. You don't necessarily need it, but again, if you're dropping Sacred Protection, find that the haste is helping, definitely go for it. Otherwise, I go with just the 3 perks here, and then we go with Bend Light, so then we have a 20% buff to healing with a dodge, which we're dodging a lot, especially with Refreshing Evasion. You can go with Protector's Strength, so if you have a buff, you heal for 20% more, which we almost always were going to have a buff going at most times, so that's another 20% buff to our healing. And then the Glowing Focus, so then any buffs that we are granting last a little bit longer. So any fortifies, anything like that, lasts a little bit longer. I do think it does help. Again, feel free to take some of these, perks and change them around for what fits you and your group or how you heal. Because definitely this works for me, but it might not work for someone else exactly how they like to heal. So this is what I like to go with, though, for my build for the Void Gauntlet and then the Lifestaff. Not too crazy different for the builds themselves for the season, but just some slight changes. Like I said, Orb of Protection, because of Fortify changes, I now run Beacon. I don't think there's anything wrong with Orb, but with Beacon we can get our cooldowns back pretty darn quickly, which I'll show in the next part here. But that is it for the build. Let's take a look at some of the abilities and kind of go over some tips and tricks with the healer build that I like to use. Alright, so looking at this build, let's start with the Void Gauntlet. So, like I said, I like to run the Glimpse of the Void perk on the right side on the Decay tree, and it really does work really well. Let's look at it one more time here. So gain a stack of Void Essence per successful ability hit. At 4 or more stacks, your successful ranged heavy attack will instantly reset all Void Gauntlet abilities and remove all stacks. And that's a 15-second cooldown, which really isn't that long of a cooldown. So really all we need to do is get those 4 stacks, right? So with those stacks, we can't get any stacks with Oblivion, but we can with the Dream and the Orb of Decay. So with the Orb, let's see if we can line this up. There's 4 test dummies here. Ideally, I'll use some cooldowns here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Circle, Scream, and then an Orb. Then we're going to Heavy Attack, and that'll get us all of our cooldowns back if I do it right. So let's try this out here. So we'll go Circle, Scream, there's 1 stack, Orb, there's 4 stacks. See how we have 4 stacks now? Heavy Attack, all of our cooldowns are back. That's why I run Glimpse of the Void, because especially in like an OPR match, you're going to be sending an Orb into a big group, right? A lot of times when it's like a choke, I'm going to circle, maybe scream if someone's there, but then I'll send an orb into the big group of people, and that will actually get me, a lot of times it'll get me at least 4 stacks, which case I land a heavy, and all of a sudden I get all my cooldowns back, and I'm able to lay down another circle. So Glimpse of the Void, very, very good perk to run, pretty easy to control as long as you're paying attention to those stacks. Because again, Scream, 4 stacks, heavy attack. There you go. A Glimpse of the Void. Highly recommend it if you run Void Gauntlet like I do. So that's really it for Void. There's nothing overly special. As long as you can kind of maintain some of that cooldown reduction, you are good to go. Next, let's look at the Lifestaff. So with the Lifestaff, like I said, I'm running Beacon. With Beacon, a lot of it comes down to cooldown control, right? So the big reason why I didn't like Beacon before is because the cooldown was so long. Where now that I have my Refreshing Evasion build, I'm actually able to get that cooldown back and essentially keep a constant beacon going. So I'll show you here. So I'm going to send a beacon and we'll look at the cooldown time, right? So 30 seconds, 32 seconds, but as we are as we're rolling, you can see that cooldown reduction dropping about 2 seconds every single time. And this is with 5 stacks of Refreshing Evasion, right? So just from dodging, and we're not going crazy, left us with about 8 seconds given I wasn't rolling the whole time, right? So now we send our beacon, dodge, light, dodge, light, dodge, light. You can see that our cooldown reduction is kind of crazy now. Now we have a second beacon out with that. So see that cooldown, 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 dodge, cooldown, dodge, cooldown. And as long as you're landing those lights especially, and obviously you can land a heavy too to try to get those stacks, but if you land a light with a roll, you get crazy cooldown. And see how you can pretty much just keep a constant beacon going at all times, so it's pretty crazy. But nothing too special with the healer build. Obviously you want to make sure that you're sending your Divine Embrace properly, using your Sacred Ground. But the big thing is that cooldown reduction. So as you can see, look at that cooldown on Sacred Ground. See how fast you get those cooldowns back. And that's why I like running Refreshing Evasion. Refreshing obviously gives you some crazy cooldown reduction if you have a bunch of stacks of it, and that is really nice, and a lot of people do really like that. For me, I just like having a little bit more control. So let's say I am in a fight, and then all of a sudden Baron's up, right? Shoot my beacon, and the entire time on my way to Baron, I'm getting my cooldown back. And a lot of times by the time I get to Baron, I've got another beacon ready to go. So that's why I like the Refreshing Evasion. Refreshing, though, is a fantastic way to go. So I do recommend, if you already have a bunch of Refreshing gear, just go with that. But if you want to try Refreshing Evasion, I do highly recommend it. So that is, though, kind of how I run a lot of the perks and abilities. It's really not anything too crazy, but if you can get used to some of the cooldown reduction and working that cooldown reduction, you are going to be sitting pretty good with this. All right, that is going to do it for this one. So thank you very much for watching this video. I know Season 1 has changed a bit for some of us, and it's taking a little bit of adjusting, getting used to. But luckily, I have been playing around with a lot of builds. I'm enjoying healer this patch as well. This build itself has been really fun. And again, with any of my build videos, I do encourage you to take it, maybe use it as a platform to start your build off of. And if that particular build works for you, that's awesome. Like, I'm really glad to hear that. But if you do need to change some stuff, definitely let me know what you changed and how it worked for you, because I'm always looking to try to improve build or try some different play styles, anything like that. So I really do hope this video helped you out. If it did, please drop it a like, drop a sub if you'd like to see more videos and more notifications on videos. And then I also stream throughout the week on Twitch, so I'd love to have you stop on by. ask some questions live or just kind of hang out. But that is going to do it for this one. So until next time, I will see you guys later.